What's up, y'all? Hope you're having a good day. Today, we're here to talk about some stuff that's been coming out, some news articles and things about Sony and AMD. If you know who AMD is, they're like a graphics card company. Graphics cards are the things that kind of allow you to see what's happening in the games you play on your PlayStation, Xbox, or PC. And they've been teasing some stuff and some talking about things and, AI boosted graphics and things for like the PlayStation 6 or a future generation console, which is probably the PlayStation 6. So let's get into it. Now, in my opinion, and you can ask a lot of gamers, but I feel like graphics have reached a plateau, and it's not necessarily a bad place. I feel like it's pretty healthy, where games can only look so good. It may not be your preferred art style, but the graphics are pretty crispy. They're not blurry or pixelated or anything like that, and it's in a pretty good place. You look at games like The Last of Us, where you're kind of going for something where it's kind of more human, kind of grounded in realism, where those are like maybe some higher end graphics. Then you have games like the Ratchet and Clank or like Demon Souls remake, and these are all PlayStation examples, where the graphics are beautiful with more of a cartoon kind of animated look to it. And then you have Demon Souls, which is a fantasy world, which is still really stunning. And you can kind of see that the graphics look really good. And it's like, how much better can it get? And why are we pushing so hard for that when there are other things that can be looked at? I can't name a single game that had like graphics that were out of this world. And like the graphics alone carried the gameplay to where the game is something that people talk about to this day. Now, are there examples of games that look really good that kind of fell flat? Sure. I mean, you could even argue Concord that, kind of flopped last year. I wouldn't say that it was like, I would say that it looked clean, but it didn't deliver in so many other places that it just fell flat. I wouldn't say it's the best looking game out there, but I think if we're talking good graphics, I think it checked off that box. But there are many other games which you guys please in the comment section list games that look great that just kind of fell flat, and you'll kind of see that graphics alone does not carry a game. So hopefully we can agree graphics shouldn't be the focus, right? So what should Sony or PlayStation be focusing on? What about things like applying themes to your PlayStation? That used to be such a big thing on the PS4, being able to, or maybe the PS3, it's a little fuzzy, where you could apply a theme from your favorite game to your PlayStation. It would change all the icons. You'd have a cool little background, and it just kind of lets you personalize your space, and you would change it from game to game, maybe even go back to old ones. Like when PlayStation did like the anniversary thing, and they had themes and stuff that you could apply and have like the sound go off when your PlayStation was turning on, like that made such a buzz and so many people were excited for that. Why didn't they lean into that? I mean, realistically, I would like for them to do it for the low, but I get that they're a business and they're probably going to charge, some fairly decent prices. Not decent, but you know what I mean? I want to get into the money aspect of it, but like, why didn't they pursue that? That's a way to make your PlayStation more fun. Having the beep sound go off for the nostalgia factor for the older crowd, being able to change your background and have the cool Spider-Man theme or maybe a God of War theme. Like that's fun stuff. And that's small little nice things that kind of make your PlayStation feel more homey. Like why are we not pursuing those kind of things? So let's talk about collaborations. Astrobot, which won Game of the Year last year, was a collection of all of Sony's IPs, maybe not all of them, but a great deal of them, if not all, come together in Astrobot for a lighthearted, fun game where they took the characters from those games and they kind of turned them into like little Astrobots, and you got to interact with them and kind of go down like memory lane and just kind of interact with them outside of their regular games. And it was a blast. It was fun, and it won Game of the Year. And it makes you think, like, why don't we see cool little collaborations between other games? Why can't we have Kratos pop up in Metal Gear? Why can't we have Crash Bandicoot show up in like The Last of Us? Goofy side little things that don't have to be a part of the main story by any means, right? But just have like a cool side mission, maybe make it some kind of pre-order incentive if you want to do that. Things like that. But it's a cool opportunity to make games more fun, more memorable, expose people to other games that they may, or franchises that they may not be really familiar with, and have fun at the same time. It's bringing fun back to gaming. And I feel like this is such a layup because they own all the IPs, so they can greenlight everything. Of course, the studios would have to want to do that stuff, or I guess you could make them, but it's just like, it's an opportunity. You look at TV shows, and I did a lot of Nickelodeon, but I was also a Cartoon Network kid. You look at Nickelodeon, and they had crossovers between like the Fairly Odd Parents and like Jimmy Neutron, and that was like really cool. That was sick. There was like a whole time period where there was all kinds of crossovers, which I can't remember all of them, and I don't feel like Googling them. But if you remember a cool crossover from your TV shows, I know like Disney had some stuff. I can't remember if Cartoon Network had any crossovers. I don't really think so, but I know Nickelodeon had a handful that were really cool. But my point is that crossovers or collaborations or whatever is a slam dunk opportunity, since they own so many of them, to maybe focus on trying to get that kind of stuff going for their games. And before I forget, while we're on the topic of collaborations, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royal was like supposed to be PlayStation's kind of spin on like the Super Smash Bros. Scene. Now we know it didn't work out. It didn't really catch on the way that they wanted it to, but honestly, it was a cool idea where they had characters like Kratos, you had Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, Dante, Raiden from Metal Gear, and there was a handful of other characters and stuff that they had in there. And it was a cool experience where, again, they're collaborating, bringing all their IPs together so that you can expose people to characters or franchises they may not know about, play those games too, and, you know, maybe establish a new connection with those other franchises. And I'm not sure, and this was many years ago. Now, I'm not sure, because this didn't work out the way they wanted it to, that they didn't do anymore. But again, they have all the stuff in their wheelhouse. They don't have to put everything in every single game, but they could definitely do some more crossovers. Now, while we're talking about PlayStation All-Stars and like this kind of whole multiplayer thing, I want to talk about where PlayStation currently is with games, because IGN a week ago brought up a really good point to where a lot of their most recent hits kind of had the same theme, and it's kind of starting to feel samey. And it's going to tie back into the PlayStation All-Star things in a second here. So you look at Ghost of Tsushima. I haven't played Yotei, but from what I heard, they're kind of similar in terms of story. God of War, Last of Us, even Spider-Man. And the theme that connects these games is like family grievance or family issues and a circle of violence. Like, those are the two revolving themes that kind of keep reoccurring across Last of Us 1 and 2, the God of War games. What did I say was the other one? Ghost of Tsushima and Yotei. And it's kind of like this, they're all third person action adventure games. And I think IGN brought up a good point. I feel like PlayStation, yes, and this is not a big complaint, this is just conversation, right? And I'm not faulting them. If it works, why change it? But you should have some variety, to be fair. And I feel like we need to see more games like PlayStation All-Stars, maybe not that specifically, but maybe like a Mario Party attempt, you know, something like in that structure, you know, venture out. Like, I get that they're known for single player games, and I know they tried to venture out with Concord and it didn't work, and they got a lot of hate for it, and they got kicked quite a bit while they were down, and it's unfortunate. But you know, I hope someone from PlayStation sees this and this doesn't discourage them. Like, you know, continue to try. I'm not saying go full blown multiplayer, because that is a big commitment. Live service and all that's a big commitment. But just, you know, think about multiplayer games and just breaking it up. You know, the story kind of is run its course. I'm not saying you can't do any more ever, but you know, there's other types of storytelling and themes you can put into your games. It doesn't have to be all single player. You can do like your Gang Beast, you can do Among Us or like Fall Guys type stuff with your IPs. So like, don't be afraid to explore, you know, don't be afraid to let smaller studios take on that task and venture out and try that stuff. I think those games are great, to be clear. I enjoyed all of them thoroughly. It's just that, you know, I think IGN brought up a good point, which is something and I didn't think I'd be saying in 2025, or any point, honestly, going forward. But, you know, it's just kind of like there is a pattern that's starting to develop, and you don't want your single player games to start to trend downward, because you've already had issues with Concord, among other multiplayer games, or maybe just Concord. But you kind of that's already one massive blow. You know, you don't want your single player games to start to decline too, because Xbox is already in the pickle. You know, we don't want them to also be in the same situation. So just something to think about. You know, your Mario Party games, they already did Sonic Racing, which is technically not a Sony exclusive, but you know, there's stuff out there that they could look at and say, can we do our own spin on this and see if it works out or not. So that's all that to say is, I know I've been yapping for a little bit, but hopefully you've enjoyed so far. Definitely consider hitting that like button, sub, comment what you've thought about the video and the questions I've asked throughout. But my point is to circle back to the big question is, have they lost the plot of what it means to have fun? You know, I feel like there might be too big a focus on delivering graphics, which again can only go so far. And, you know, we're kind of getting a lot of the same single player games. You know, break out. You know, everything doesn't have to be a big AAA 40-60 hour playthrough. Something could be 10 to 20 hours, maybe 15 to like 25. Cool, quick, fun experience. You know, get your crossovers in there. Think about ways to make the PlayStation more engaging by adding themes, and maybe not a full blown social media thing, because I know there was like a page they had where players could do that stuff, but people never really engaged with it. But, you know, think about ways to get something, you know, make that stuff more accessible, you know, maybe put it more up front and center. And there's just think about making the PlayStation a place for fun, because like when I get on there to mostly play a game. But if I was to play something on my PlayStation versus something on my PC, then I would tell people, hey, PC has mods. Like, what does the PlayStation have that makes me want to come over and play it, other than exclusive games that kind of have this repetitive story thing happening amongst all of them? So that's just my thing. That's just my 2 cents. I still love PlayStation as a franchise. I want to see them succeed as long as they're respectful to the consumers. Man, I kind of sorry I felt like a word vomit right there towards the end, but just some thoughts. Are graphics really what they should be focusing on? And that's the question I'll leave you guys with. Again, like, sub, comment, all that good stuff. Y'all stay safe. Peace.